Will Rich Davis, Dr. Davis, please come forward?
How do I get up here?
Oh, and I would like Stacy, Lydia, and Gabby to stand up, wave, and say hi. So this is Rich's wife and two daughters, Gabby and Lydia. And they also have a son, Adam, who's married to Diana for 3 years. They're celebrating their third anniversary this year, so that's amazing. Mm-hmm. And they're living in South Carolina. So that's their family. And Stacy's been a good friend of mine ever since college when we were roommates. Actually, we were paired together before we were roommates. And Stacy didn't like me very much. But I grew on her, and I'm so grateful.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. It's a thing. She'll tell you the story. Anyway, so this is Rich Davis, Dr. Rich Davis, and I've spoken about him many times before when talking about missions. And just an impressive person and sacrificial, him and Stacy, to say, be educated as a doctor and to choose not to reap the benefits of all that education to become a wealthy doctor here in the United States, to sacrifice it all, give it up, go to Africa where there are so few doctors, do all kinds of general surgery that you don't even know. You've never even heard of a certain disease or seen something like that in the United States, and trying to figure it out on the fly with textbooks and stuff like that. He'll tell you all about it. But then to train up other doctors in Africa, it's really amazing. And so he will be giving us a word today, and they are going to be returning to the U.S. They get started in 2006, so as long as our missions program has been going on, they've been missionaries serving the communities in Africa and also in Los Angeles for a brief time. And so I just wanted to pray for them right now before Rich starts, just a blessing on them as they return back to life in the U.S., and that the Lord would lead them and to help them to know, what to do next, what's their next step. So Lord, thank you for Rich and Stacy, for Gabby, Lydia, Adam, and Diana, for the beautiful family they are, for the sacrifices they've made over the many years, and the way you've led them through this journey. And I ask, God, that you would now begin to lead them by your Spirit through this time of rest and recuperation, and just show them what the next steps are, where you would like them to be, where would you like to plant them in the world, and just lead them forward as they're now both empty nesters officially, with Lydia graduating high school, and I ask, God, that you would just help them through this new season of life. Bless Rich as he gives the message today. We are so excited to hear what he has to say. And Lord, speak through him in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you very much. Where's the worship leader? The one who... Is she gone? Oh, yeah. I think God was absolutely right on in giving you the songs he gave you. My talk today is actually about those times when you feel like God has left you. And as I sat there, I was like, wow, that's another one of those coincidences. But okay, here's I'm going to go through some pictures of us first. This is our family back in 2023 when Adam got married. So that's him in the middle with his new wife Diana, and then me and Stacy on each side of him, and Gabby and Lydia. Next slide, please. So we are, I guess I should say we were. What we spent the last 20 years in Kenya doing was teaching, caring for patients surgically, and teaching other doctors to also be surgeons and become certified surgeons in Africa. So that's me on the left in a classroom. I didn't put any pictures of me operating, but you can picture what that's like. Stacy does admin work for several groups that are doing discipleship and church planting among the unreached peoples in Sudan. And that's her in Sudan, actually, in a town called Yeda. And then below, she also did this thing called Kairos, which is a course about basically God's heart for missions in the world, God's heart for the world. It really is something that sort of changed my perspective on things as well. Next slide, please. This is where we are in Kenya, which is on the eastern coast of Africa. And we're sort of near that little dot, Nairobi, you can see. We're in a rural area, but we're right there. Can you find Zambia on here? Can anyone see where Zambia is? Does everybody know? It's down and to the west. This says Zambia right there. That's where you all are going. I'm really glad some people are headed to Africa. I've got some advice for you. I hope it's good advice. Yeah, next slide, please. This is Kajabi Hospital. This is where we spent our time. It's on the edge of the Great Rift Valley, so we're looking out over the valley. We're at 7,500 feet, so even though we're near the equator, it wasn't really hot and sticky like you think of, like it probably is in Zambia, actually. But we were there for 20 years of our lives, and that's the hospital where I spent all my time. Next slide, please. I always put this slide in when I speak to people about Africa because Africa is so big, you can't imagine how big it really is. You can fit China and the United States and India and all of Europe into the continent of Africa. So when people say, oh, Ebola, I'm like, Ebola is thousands of miles away from me. Africa is huge, right? So you can't really imagine how big it is. And again, I'm not talking about Africa. I'm talking about Kenya, which is the Africa that I know. Next slide, please. So this is the latest photo of us. Just one more photo. This is December of last year when we were all together in Kajabi. The kids came to Kajabi for Christmas every year, even after Gabby and Adam went off to school. And so this is the last time we were all together. We're looking forward to being all together again soon. Tomorrow, Adam and Diana will arrive, yes. Next slide, please. And here's a recent event we can celebrate. Lydia graduated from high school. And as Shannon said, we are now empty nesters. And this was also our cue to reevaluate what we've been doing and look for what's next. So we have actually left Kijabe, and we covet your prayers for what's next. We're still sort of looking at that. Next slide, please. So I've chosen to speak about the story of Joseph. Is the sound okay? It sounds really echoey to me, but it's okay with you, huh? Okay. I'm not a preacher. I have never been to seminary. I've never been taught how to preach. And that's my first lesson for the Zambia people. When you go to Africa, you will be asked to preach a sermon. If you're traveling with a pastor, that might protect you, but it probably won't. So someone told me that advice, and so I promptly went and wrote down on a little piece of paper a little outline for a sermon out of Genesis chapter 12, to the point that we are all the promise of Abraham. We're all Abraham's children. And I folded that piece of paper up, and I put it in my wallet, and I forgot all about it. And probably a year later, we were in orientation in Africa. We met a guy. He said, I'm a pastor also. I'm a cook at this hospital, but I'm also a pastor. Please come to my church next Sunday. And we said, that'd be great. We'd love to come to your church. You can see where this is going. So in the car on the way there, I turned to him. I said, I'm really looking forward to hearing your sermon today. And he says, oh, I'm not preaching. You're preaching. So I pulled out my wallet. I remembered that little piece of paper. I unfolded it. It's like dozens of random pieces of paper in my wallet. And I quickly got my thoughts together, and I preached a sermon on Genesis chapter 12. So Zambia team, be advised. This might happen to you. So the story of Joseph, I'm just going to go through it briefly. I think you all know it, but just to retell it and sort of set the stage. He's one of the 12 sons of Jacob. Jacob is the son of Isaac, who is the son of Abraham, our spiritual father, as I said in my sermon that day. And he is the 11th born son from Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel. Jacob had all these other children, hoping that Rachel would finally give him a son. And finally she did, and that was Joseph. And so he is the favored son. And the father lets him know that he's the favored son. He gives him a coat of many colors. It's pretty clear to all the other sons that this is the favorite one. And if that's not enough, he has these dreams in which he... Slow down, she says. He has these dreams in which the interpretation of the dreams is that all of his brothers and his father are going to bow down to him. He doesn't keep these dreams to himself. He tells everyone, this is the dream I had. You bow down to me, and all the brothers and dad too. And so they don't like him very much, surprisingly. They end up conspiring to, first of all, they think they're going to kill him, and then they change their mind and say, let's sell him into slavery. So they sell him into slavery, and he's taken to Egypt. But it says in the Bible, the Lord was with him. So he ends up being sold in slavery in Egypt to Potiphar, who is the captain of Pharaoh's guard. And the Lord is with him. He's in charge. He's put in charge of the whole household eventually. He rises through the ranks. Eventually, he's the trustworthy man in charge of the whole place. And then he's falsely accused by Potiphar's wife. Potiphar's wife lusts after him, wants him. He says, no, how could do such a thing? Eventually, she falsely accuses him, and he's put in prison. No due process, no trial. My daughter's in law school. He's just thrown in prison. That's how it was in Egypt. You're accused, you're a slave, you're guilty. And so in prison, once again, God is with him. And the head of the prison realizes this guy's really smart. This guy has got God with him. And he eventually, so to speak, rises through the ranks of the prison as well. And eventually he's sort of the right-hand man in prison. And while he's there, Pharaoh's baker and cupbearer get put in prison. And they have dreams too. And they say, they don't know what these dreams mean, but Joseph does. God shows Joseph the meaning of the dreams. And the meaning of the dreams are the baker's going to be put to death, the cupbearer is going to be restored to his position. And 3 days later, that happens. And Joseph says, don't forget me, please. Tell him I'm here. But the cupbearer does forget about him. The baker's killed, but the cupbearer could have told Joseph, doesn't. He could have told the Pharaoh, doesn't. He forgets all about it. And eventually, Joseph is still languishing in prison, saying, why me? What's next? Pharaoh has a dream. Pharaoh has two dreams, very disturbing dreams. And in Pharaoh's dreams, he wakes up convinced that it means something, that God is trying to tell him something. And eventually, the cupbearer remembers, Joseph can interpret dreams. So they bring Joseph up out of prison. Joseph tells the meaning of Pharaoh's dream, 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. And Pharaoh realizes this guy, once again, the Lord is with him. Pharaoh puts him in charge of the whole program in Egypt of preparing for the famine and harvesting the wheat and putting it in storehouses and all that. That's exactly what happens. He comes up with a plan that saves everyone, and after 7 years of plenty, there are 7 years of famine. The famine extends into the other countries, and eventually it reaches Canaan, where his father and brothers are. His father and brothers the father sends the brothers to Egypt. The brothers meet Joseph. They don't recognize him. They bow down before him. And Joseph is extremely moved because here it is what the dream predicted is coming true. And finally, Joseph, in the end, after a sort of a soap opera-like revelation, he tells them that he's the brother. He calls for them to bring their father to Egypt. They all live together in Egypt. At one point, the father and the brothers bow down to Joseph again. And they all live in Egypt. Eventually, Jacob dies. The patriarch dies. And after Jacob dies, the brothers start saying, uh-oh, you guys, now that dad's gone, Joseph's going to get his revenge. We really did some bad things to him, right? Joseph says, they go to Joseph and they say to him, remember, Dad wants us to all get along. Dad wouldn't want us to hurt each other, right? ignoring the fact that they hurt him long ago. But Joseph, well, I think Joseph's attitude is what I want to talk about today. But a lot has happened to Joseph, right? He's been up, he's been down. He's been in charge, he's been in jail. He's been the man, and he's been no one. But it becomes clear in Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, that Joseph's heart is a heart of understanding what God is up to. Joseph says to his brothers, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." For me, this is a model of a life of faith. There's many other verses that sort of give the same idea, but the understanding, the trusting, the believing, as Joseph had, that in all things God is moving. God is moving all things happening in this world towards a resolution. Now you can say, does God cause the bad things to happen? Does God allow the bad things to happen? I don't know the answer to that one. But the fact is, God has worked through these acts, some of which were evil, and some of which were irresponsible, and some of which were just plain random. God worked through all of them to accomplish this. And even evil acts can bring God's purpose. Most of these things will not be resolved in our lifetime. It's nice when we see, oh, God did this, God did that. God directed the worship leader towards these songs. That's a nice little faith builder for all of us. But most of these things, we don't get to see the resolution. We have to agree, no matter how it seems, to see the world through these eyes. What you intended for harm, God intended for good. Next picture, please. In 2007, Stacy and I went to Kenya with our 2 children, 5 years old and 3 years old. That's a great picture. Does anyone know, besides my family, why my leg is yellow and has scars on it in this picture? It's because I broke my leg. Shortly after arriving in Kenya, I broke my leg. I had to have surgery in the very hospital where I would end up serving for 19 years. So there's a metal rod in that leg. Let's see, and we just began doing ministry. I'd spent all this time preparing. I'd gotten sermons ready in my back pocket and all that. We just started doing ministry. Shortly afterwards, next slide, please, we got a wonderful new addition. That's Lydia. That's her being held by my grandmother, who was 95 at the time of that picture. Something like that. Anyway, that's Lydia, and she joined us. But the testing of my faith really began immediately. As soon as I started practicing surgery in Kenya, I think you can go to the next slide, which is blank. It's just, I meant for it to be blank. Yes. I just want to talk a little bit about the testing of my faith, because I really had this idea. God's in control. God has everything, and God's moving everything towards a resolution that will make sense to us. So right after we got there, there was this thing that they call the post-election violence of 2007. The country actually sort of went to war with itself along tribal lines, and there was really a lot of very disturbing things happened, very disturbing things in the news, and very disturbing things coming into the hospital. There was one thing, a fire in a church in a city called Eldoret. Some people from one tribe took refuge in the church, and people from another tribe lit the church on fire. So we had to take care of some of those people that were burned in the church. It was a very disturbing thing. But I call this my journey towards spiritual maturity. I kept seeing these disturbing things. I kept praying, God, where are you? God, please save this person. God, please give me strength. And it didn't seem like he was answering my prayers. It seemed like most of the time, whether I prayed for a patient or not, didn't really make much difference. And sometimes I would say, God, I really need you to come through right now. No answer. And usually this ended in the death of the patient, which is very disturbing to me. I was just sort of going down, maybe suffering a low-grade crisis of faith as I was face-to-face with tremendous human suffering and not seeing my prayers answered and saying, God, why are you doing this? That's another cue for the Zambia team. I guess you're going to see tremendous amounts of human suffering, and you're going to say, God, why do you allow this? And you're going to hear stories. God, why do you allow these things to happen? And I'm aware of the verses like Matthew 17. If you have faith like a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, be cast into the sea, and nothing will be impossible for you. I don't know what to do with that verse. That's not been my experience. Has anyone had that experience? Really? Oh. You're like me in not having that experience. Yeah, I feel like I would be moved to pray over and over and over again, and not see God move. Now, to interrupt the doom and gloom, I did put a slide in here. The next picture. It wasn't all doom and gloom. There was a lot of real joy in walking alongside African doctors and seeing them become surgeons, seeing them graduate and finish. So that's what this collage is for. The picture in the bottom right, that's a lady who actually we expected to die. Another one where I said, okay, God, here we go. I'm praying for this lady, but you're not going to do anything. And God did. She should not have survived her complication from surgery. And there were many patients like that, to be clear. But still, there was a lot of me saying, God, where are you? What are you doing? Why aren't you moving? Kind of like what you were talking about this morning. Next slide, please. So, in my worst moments, even now, I'm going to admit this to you all. You've probably never heard a pastor preach this in a sermon before. But in my worst moments, I think, even now, the atheists are right. This life is just a random series of occurrences. It all just happens. There's no sense. There's no overall purpose. We create the illusion of right and wrong. We create the illusion of good and bad. But there's really just pleasure and pain. And that point of view is actually in the Bible. Actually, before that, let me say, if you've ever had these kinds of thoughts, if you ever thought maybe we're just making this all up to feel good about ourselves, be encouraged. There's at least one other Christian in the world. I won't make you raise your hands. But there's at least one other Christian who has these kinds of thoughts. And even after a long life of so-called spiritual maturity, still this creeps into his mind once in a while. If you've never had these kind of thoughts, I envy you a little bit. It's a blessing from God. Next slide, please. The Bible has a verse that talks about this a little bit. Ecclesiastes, the whole book of Ecclesiastes can be interpreted in this point of view. Again, I looked and saw all the oppression that was taking place under the sun. I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they have no comforter. Power was on the side of their oppressors, and they have no comforter. And I declared that the dead who had already died are happier than the living who are still alive. That's pretty bleak stuff, huh? That's in the Bible. But but better than both is the one who has never been born and who has not seen the evil that is done under the sun. Have any of you read that verse before? Yeah, I think that's a legitimate point of view. I think it's okay to go to God with these feelings and say, God, it really does seem like it's better to have not been born than to be born into this world. Things got worse. There was this thing that my whole family hears me talk about all the time called the doctor strike of 2017 and 2018. In December 2017, all of the doctors in Kenya in the public hospitals went on strike because of the conditions that the Ministry of Health was imposing on them. They said, we're not going to work anymore. They closed down all those hospitals, and they just basically stopped working. So patients who needed care had to come to the few hospitals that were still working, and one of them was our little hospital. So patients came to us from all over the country. It was the same story. They had severe injuries. They had broken legs. They had severe illnesses. They had cancer. They were getting chemotherapy, and now the chemotherapy stopped. They'd been to 7 or 8 other hospitals. They didn't get help at those hospitals. They finally end up with us. We say, we'll help you. They got admitted, and then they passed on. Over and over and over and over again. At that time, I was the medical director of the hospital. I was sort of the one in charge of making sure that everybody had what they needed. And I was really trying my best to sort of hold them together emotionally, to console them, to be there with them. And also I was doing some clinical work myself and having the same experience, the same results. Our mortality rate for children and for pregnant women tripled in that time. One of my friends is a pediatric surgeon, and he tells me that every day for those 100 days, he had to tell some parents that their child had passed. Every single day Can you imagine doing that every day for 100 days? Where are you, God? What are you doing here? Why are you allowing this suffering? Why don't you intervene in the negotiations between the union and the Ministry of Health? Why don't you intervene here? Why don't you miraculously heal these people? And why don't you hear our cries? My poor friend, I think he might have walked away from faith completely after that experience. I still think about this whole time as a time that really tested my faith. And eventually the doctor strike ended. We, that same year, went on our first we went on home assignment. We came back to the United States, and immediately after arriving, our son, our oldest, was diagnosed with a disease called dilated cardiomyopathy. He was actually admitted to the hospital. It was kind of like from one thing to another, right? Like I came home in need of rest, in need of a break, smoke coming out of my ears, the doctor strike fresh in my mind, and it's like, no, your son's being admitted to the hospital in heart failure. The doctors told us that his long-term prognosis was he would reach a plateau, he would stay at that plateau, and then one day he would fall off the plateau and need a heart transplant. I know what a heart transplant is like. I can imagine. Anyway. We also found out it was due to a gene mutation, and it was also in other members of our family, and we were told similarly that those people would also eventually, in a very predictable way, suffer from heart failure. So it was a real blow to our whole family. And you guys, those of you who were around at that time, you prayed for us. Many, many people all over the world were praying for us. I still meet people who say, oh, you're the one. Yes, I was praying for you. I remember that. Like even now, even a couple months ago, I met someone who told me that same story. The church came together and really, really prayed for us. And in the end, he actually had a miraculous recovery. He recovered against what the doctor predicted. The doctor said he'd only seen it in one other patient to actually get better instead of having a plateau. He just ran an ultra marathon a couple weeks ago. Yeah. And they did more research into that gene, and they found that it's not the death sentence they thought it was. It's much more common in the general population than they first thought, and so it's not an automatic heart failure. So really, in that sense, God answered all of your prayers, and I'm very thankful for that. I'm very thankful to the people who were praying, but I still couldn't help but think, it still seems kind of random, doesn't it? I'm not being ungrateful here. But like, I prayed to you so many times for so many people's lives. You answered this prayer, you don't answer that prayer. What's going on? Let's have our next. This is, next slide, please. This is Hebrews 11. Hebrews 11 is a great chapter for faith. It's basically about faith and about the heroes of faith of the Bible. I love Hebrews 11. I can't talk about faith without talking about Hebrews 11. Here's the middle. I would just read the whole thing to you if I could, but here's the middle. All these people, all the heroes he's been describing, were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they left, they would have had an opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. I met Stacy at the Coast Vineyard when they met in La Jolla, and our pastor was Don Williams. And Don Williams used to say, excuse me? Yeah, you know Don Williams, or you knew Don Williams. I think he's passed now. He used to say, we all have a God-shaped void inside of us, a God-shaped empty spot that needs to be filled with something. We try to fill it with other things, power, fame, drugs, alcohol, but God is the only thing that can fill this space. And that's what I think of when I see this verse. This is not how this world is not how things are supposed to be. We are not how we are supposed to be. We have a void inside of us. We are actually longing for another country, another place that God is going to restore us to. And if we don't see God's promises in this life, in this world, with this void inside of us, if that void doesn't get filled, That's in the Bible as well. Some of the heroes of faith did not receive the things they promised, and that's okay. I think of the C.S. Lewis quote, "If I find in myself desires that nothing in this world can satisfy, I can only conclude I was not made for here." Right? This world is not, we're not looking for fulfillment. Even as nice as answered prayers are, that's not our ultimate hope. Our ultimate hope is that God is going to resolve history. He's going to bring all of the tears and all of the pain, all of the sorrow, as hard as that might be for me to explain, as unsatisfactory as that might be to the parent who's lost a child. I believe that God is going to resolve all of these things. Courage is not the lack of fear. Courage is going forward in spite of your fear, right? And in the same way, faith is going forward despite your doubt. Faith is not the absence of doubt. I think for a long time I believed that. I still have doubts, therefore my faith must be weak. Faith is not the absence of doubt. Faith is going forward. Just like the heroes of the faith, they may have had some doubts. They did not receive the things they were promised. In other parts of this chapter 11, it talks about the things they went through. They were sawn in two, they lived in caves, etc., etc. I'm sure they had doubts at those times. Faith is not the absence of doubt. But what it really comes down to for me, I guess the big realization has been that this is about obedience. It's about choosing to see the world in a certain way. Obedience and submission, right? It's like saying, this is all random, this is all just nothingness, a collision of molecules. That's really an act of defiance, isn't it? That's really like shaking your fist at God and saying, God, I don't believe in you. I refuse to believe that this makes sense. It doesn't make sense. That's an act of defiance. And in a sense, that's like saying, I know better than God. At the end of Ecclesiastes, that gloomy Bible book in the Bible that says nothing makes sense, all is meaningless. Meaningless is like 50 times in that chapter. Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. So if you are feeling like I felt during the doctor strike, or like I sometimes feel even now, if you are feeling like all is meaningless and this doesn't make sense, it really is a matter of obedience. It's a matter of saying, no, I'm not going to let my mind go there, and just keep at it. Don't give up. That is all I have to say. I think there's going to be a prayer time now, and if anyone wants prayer, I imagine I would encourage you to get prayer for any lack of faith or tendency to see the world in a different way than the way God is designed. But God really is moving all things towards a conclusion, towards a resolution that's going to make sense, even if right now you can't imagine how it could possibly make sense. I know what that feels like. I've been there. I've been there in very, very real ways. So, please come forward. The worship team and the prayer team, come forward. Thank you.